Greetings! So in today's video, this is gonna be a relatively quick one. I just want to go back to the paper pad that I got from Rubens. If you remember my video about the large ceramic pans, I mentioned that I had also received a paper pad, but that I was a bit nervous for one, and then a bit unsure about what to paint in it. So I ran out of time and I said that I would make a separate video. Well, this is this video. I took a reference photo, and that's something that I like to do, but when I do studies, I like to put a cat in my study so that it's not just a study, that it has a bit of a story as well. This is what I drew on the pad, and I proceeded like I usually do for my paintings. So I taped off a border. I really like having the clean edges. And as you can see, once I removed the protective page on top of the block, the paper underneath has a really nice texture. It is cold pressed, but it's not heavily textured. It is kind of my favorite level of texturing for paper, so I was quite happy with that. There is one little space to insert a letter opener or a blade or some kind of tool to separate the pages, but that's going to be for later. For now, I'm going to keep the sheet attached to the block because that's how blocks are meant to be used. They are supposed to keep your paper flatter as it dries, so that's what we'll test out too. My very first step, the thing that I always start with when doing an illustration like that, is I do a first wet pass. So I wet the whole paper, and then using a somewhat large and not very precise brush, I drop in some color cues. This time I have a reference, so I'm using that, but when I don't have a reference, it's going to be my lighting. If anything is glowy, I'm going to try to put it in at this step. And then I let this layer fully dry. It's a bit like my guide for the painting, and also it helps avoid having any kind of little white spot that is not painted. Sometimes I like having little white highlights, little bits that are not painted, and other times I kind of like to have a more uniform look. I feel like this way all the colors blend together better. So when my first pass is completely dry, that's when I go back and then I do mostly wet on dry. I might do a bit of wet on wet to incorporate some variance in the colors, some changes in the hue or something. But overall, I'm looking for a more control approach. I want edges that I can control so that I can use water to soften, or that I can paint as is to keep them sharp. Usually, this step of painting is the more lengthy one because I do multiple passes. I will do a first pass, let it dry, then try to look and figure out what else I need to add in, and add layers and layers and layers. Always wet on dry, so you kind of have to let the layers dry in between. When there's a character, I don't necessarily want the colors to bleed into each other, so that's the part that's the most finicky. But overall, it's a pretty simple and straightforward approach, I feel like. And in that sense, the paper worked out really well for me. My inking on it went well. The pen I like to use didn't have any issue with this particular paper. And then when I painted over it, also didn't run into any issues. The colors didn't get fuzzy. If my paper was dry, well, I could get a sharp edge. And if my paper was wet, well, I would get a softer edge. So that's the usual behavior you expect from paper. And it went really well. I really had a fun time painting on this paper. I like the idea of a block. It's a bit more convenient. The only thing that I noticed while painting this one is that the area of the block that is not glued down, that part buckled a bit. I was not expecting that. Makes it much easier to insert the letter opener at the end to separate the sheet, but also it kind of brings in this bump in the paper as I paint, so you kind of have to be careful with that. Luckily for me, that area of the painting was mostly done, but if I had to paint there again, I would be worried that my wash would pull in a weird way. The sheet was really easy to separate from the paper, no problem with that. I ran into a few issues removing my tape. Now, the good thing is that the tape managed to keep the edges of my painting really crisp. The paint didn't seep under it, the tape didn't peel off, but as I carefully removed the tape the way I always do, it tore off some of the paper. Not a particularly alarming amount of paper, but still enough to be kind of annoying and a bit noticeable in some areas. This happens, I know that. I know that the texture of the paper also plays a role in whether tape will peel off nicely or not. More often than not, if you run into issues with tape tearing off a bit of paper, it's often with hot press, like the smoother paper. But still, this one is supposed to be cold press, so it has a bit of a texture, but few bits of paper were significantly ripped off. Now, it's not all that bad. I regularly run into this thing where when you peel off the tape, some little bits of paper, they don't necessarily get torn off, but they kind of rise up a bit. So what I usually do is I take a bone folder and I gently buff the paper to bring down all those little bits of paper that were raised by the tape. You can also buff over any any tears in the paper. It will help make them a bit smoother, but if the tears are significant, they're still going to be a bit visible. So that would be my only sort of little note about this paper. Be mindful of the tape you use. I haven't tested masking fluid on it, but that's also something that, if possible, I would recommend testing on a bit of paper or having a sacrificial sheet or something that gets all the swatches, all the tests, all the everything on it. But yeah, overall, really nice paper, nice block. It's a good size. I really enjoyed working on it. I was able to prop the lid under the block and it gave it just a little slight angle, and I thought that was quite nice as well. I'm looking forward to painting more paintings on this paper. I think that's going to be a lot of fun. And also, if you didn't quite catch that, but I painted the painting with the 3 ceramic pans only. So you can see a different painting done with these 3 colors. Let me know what you think. I would love to read your thoughts in the comments, and I would definitely recommend this paper if you're okay with the little things that I mentioned, like the part that buckled just a little bit and the fact that it doesn't seem to like masking tape all that much. But if you're fine with that, I really liked the texture of the paper and I really enjoyed how it worked with my paints. Thank you so much for watching this video. Thank you so much, Paul Rubens, for sending me the paints and the paper. I had a really fun time, and we will see each other in the next video. Take care. Bye bye.